Hi, my name is Hunter Lovins. I am president of Natural Capitalism Solutions. This is Jeff Hohensee. He is the vice president of Natural Capitalism Solutions. We're coming to you live from Boulder, Colorado, the studios of Earth Coast Productions. And we're thrilled to be here talking with you about a new book that I am the lead author on called A Finer Future. We've asked you to send in questions, and we're playing with the technology in the studio here. We've asked you to send in questions that we will be taking. Please, if you have any questions and we haven't gotten to them yet, send them to
www.natcapsolutions.org/livestream.
And if after we're done, we haven't gotten to a question or you have a new one, send it to
The same address. It's our home domain for all things natural capitalism. www.natcapsolutions.org/Kickstarter. If you go to Kickstarter, there's a tab right underneath the lead video there where you can add comments, and we would love to continue this conversation with you.
So let's jump in. First question we were given is, what's wrong with the global economy right now? What do we need to do to rebuild it? What's wrong with the global economy now is that it isn't working for most people. 8 men have as much wealth as the 3.5 billion poorest people on the planet. Last year, that was 65 people that had as much wealth as the bottom half of the population. This is getting worse and fast. So we have staggering amounts of inequality. We are in a climate crisis. If you haven't already, go see Al Gore's new film, An Inconvenient Sequel, not because of Al. And the film is way too much about Al. But in it are just staggering images, video of the climate crisis, of glaciers in Greenland literally exploding and collapsing, of the heat waves in places like India, of the conditions across the north of Africa. Because of climate change and failed states, we now have 65 million people on the move, migrants, refugees, fleeing areas where they can no longer grow food. We have corporations out of control. We have so much work to do. We're beyond the planetary boundaries and we're failing to meet the human minimums. This is called the donut. We are beyond the edges of the safe operating space for humanity. We need to be above the human minimums, below the planetary boundaries. This is the work of Dr. Kate Raworth of Oxford, who has a brilliant new book out called Donut Economics, in which she walks through the 7 steps that we need to take to get to this safe and just operating space, a regenerative economy, or as I like to say, an economy in service to life. And if I walked through now all of what Kate's saying, what the ecological economists like Dr. Robert Costanza are saying, and what I've said in our new book, A Finer Future, we'd take up the entire hour and you wouldn't go and read the book. So I'm going to leave it at that and move on.
There's another piece that I think is more personal. If you personally reflect on the economy, first off, the economy is responsible for your life support system. We depend on our economy in the year 2017 in the Western world for food and for shelter, for everything that sustains us. And it's brittle and it's fragile and it can break. We have 3 days worth of food sitting in grocery stores, and if the economy stops chugging along, we're going to have riots in the street and people starving. It is not a safe situation right now. And for us to be able to have safety, let alone human happiness, ask yourself, is the economic drivers, are you motivated by getting massive amounts of wealth? Is it really important for you to have consumer goods? Is the economy really helping you to live a happy and fulfilled life? At a core personal level, is the economy working for you?
And if it's not, then get a copy of A Finer Future. We walk through the fact that we have all the technologies, all the approaches we need to solve these problems. So let's go. The second question is, what are we doing at Natural Capitalism? Natural Capitalism is an entrepreneurial nonprofit. We work with companies, communities, countries on more regenerative ways to solve these problems and to do so profitably. So I'm writing a book. I also teach at the Bard MBA in Sustainable Management in New York City. If any of you are looking for an MBA program, this is a pretty great one. I'm also working with an international team pulling together a number of the organizations that have been working in this space. So one called Leading for Wellbeing, another called Alliance for Sustainability and Prosperity. We're building a new organization to take these concepts that we've laid out in A Finer Future. Stuart Wallace, who for 20 years ran New Economics Foundation in the United Kingdom, is going to be heading this group up. He's one of the co-authors on A Finer Future. Leaders like Anders Wigman, who is a European parliamentarian, one of the co-presidents of the Club of Rome. John Fullerton, who runs Capital Institute, who has a set of principles of what a regenerative economy would be, is another one of the authors on the book. And Graham Maxton, who's the Secretary General of the Club of Rome, is one of the authors on the book. The book grew out of a conversation at the club of, can humanity avoid total system collapse? And some of the club members said no. And if you look at the old projection from the book Limits to Growth that the club brought out in 1972, and you follow the data from 72 until now, we are right on track for the worst of the collapse projections. And I said, but we have all the answers. We know how to fix these problems. And they said, good, you get to write the book. So what we have done is pull together the challenges that we're facing, but also the incredible opportunities to build an entrepreneurial world that, as Buckminster Fuller said, works for 100% of humanity. So that's been my work for the last couple of years. Jeff, what else are we doing?
So just a piece on your book, one of the things that we're trying to do in framing a new economy is to find a different way to be able to get content and books out. Instead of the traditional publishing route, we're trying this crowdfunding campaign. Instead of trying to go to Wall Street and to Madison Avenue and to the places where the big publishing houses are, we're hoping that you're going to be able to join us to be able to, from the ground up, be able to make this book available to you and to others. So if you have it within you, if you can buy a copy, a pre-copy through this Kickstarter campaign, www.natcapsolutions.org/Kickstarter, we would really appreciate your support in being able to find right now a way to start a new way of doing publishing and books in a new economy.
And if we pull this Kickstarter campaign off, we will not only publish and make available the book, but if we hit our stretch goal, we will create an interactive website where we can have these kind of conversations on an ongoing basis, and you can join the conversation. So, as Jeff said, we'd really appreciate your help on this. Now, the rest of Natural Capitalism.
Natural Capitalism has a consulting practice. We work with corporations. Over the last many years, they've represented about 3% of U.S. GDP. We work with communities. Right now, we're working with a couple here in Colorado. One of them, Fort Collins, is trying to work to use economic development strategies to realize their CAP goals. If you take
Climate
a look
action
if you
plan.
look at climate action plans, yes, I think you need a decoder ring to be part of this to get through the acronyms. If you look at the climate action goals of most cities and you go math out the capital it's going to take to be able to fulfill those goals, while all of it can be done at a profit, you have to come up with the upfront capital, which most building owners, homeowners, residents, multifamily dwellings, small businesses don't have the capital to do. So we're taking a look at how do you rally the capital and how do you use public-private partnerships and other tools and mechanisms to be able to make capital available so that they can get paid back with the savings that's going to come from realizing your cap goals. That's an example of the kind of leading edge work that's being done in that city, Fort Collins, and it's the kind of work that Natural Capitalism is very proud to be part of. We've also taken over the Colorado Carbon Fund, Colorado is a leader and a laggard, depending on what part of the state you want to look at. We are leading the clean energy race, and we're leading the fracking race. It's painful for us and inspiring at the same time.
We actually aren't anymore leading the clean energy race. California's got that one in the bag.
Well, there you go. We're still probably winning the fracking
We're one
race.
of the 5, and yeah, we are. Well, we're in there in fracking. We in North Dakota.
So the Colorado Carbon Fund is a way. Carbon funds are a way to be able to use market mechanisms to be able to take the money from to offset the carbon that I have. So I've reduced all the carbon. I live in a net zero energy house. I drive an electric car. I still have some existing carbon in my lifestyle. So get to a carbon neutral lifestyle. Personally, I offset the rest. The Colorado Carbon Fund gives me the ability to do that here in Colorado. I can go purchase offsets that are verified that then reduce the amount of carbon being paid off. And we don't think that's enough, though. So in addition to being able to pay for the verified carbon offset, we also do community benefit projects.
I work, for example, with the Savory Institute, which is showing how you can use regenerative grazing practices to take carbon out of the air and put it back in the soil. If you want a good video on that, check out Gabe Brown, Keys to Building a Healthy Soil, who describes how he is doing this. We want to be doing this here in Colorado. We also, as part of Natural Capitalism, have a bicycle program teaching young people how to ride bicycles safely, rebuild bicycles, and at the end they get a bicycle for free, called Chain Reaction. So we are trying to walk our talk as well. I live in a little ranch with a 5 kilowatt solar system. I drive a Leaf, an electric car. But the Colorado Carbon Fund gives you, if you live in Colorado, and heck, even if you don't and want to help with community benefit programs, the ability to offset your carbon and help build a better community.
Those community benefit projects are too early yet to have the verified numbers to be an offset, but we know in our hearts and in our souls
heads
that they absolutely are creating carbon benefits. So we are investing. When you do an offset with the Colorado Carbon Fund, you're investing in both. So that's another project we're doing. It can be done in many communities.
The book. The book walks through, as I said, the opportunities ahead of us. It starts with a vision of what would a world look like, feel like to live in if we solve these problems. Go 50 years in the future. What's it like to be there, to live in a co-housing development, to have local food, to have clean air and clean water, to have entrepreneurs generating all the solutions that we need. We then look at flashback to the challenges that are facing us now and the severity of these challenges. Then look at the need for a new narrative. The world we have today was built for purpose by 36 men who came together in 1947 and created the narrative of neoliberalism. This is the belief that the only thing that matters is your personal liberty to act in what they believed was a perfect market, that basically as humans we're greedy. All we want is money. Government is bad. We should have small government, but a strong military. And we have that, and all is well with the world. Now, this was a tough slog for them in 1947. Government was looked on with some favor. It had just won the war. It had ended the Great Depression. Throughout the 50s, the 60s, government was a powerful force. But here in this country in 1971, a man named Lewis Powell wrote a memorandum that laid out a strategy of how business could rise. On the strength of that, they created institutions, Heritage Foundation, ALEC, American Enterprise Legislative Council, Hudson, Hoover, Heartland, Cato. They started writing policy for the federal government. It started implementing it in 1980. Ronald Reagan was elected here, Margaret Thatcher in the UK, and neoliberalism won the world around. With the fall of the Berlin Wall in the late 80s, it won globally. And it is now the economic model that's in our head. We need a new narrative, a story of this world that works for everyone. So I walk through, how do we transform corporations, finance, agriculture, energy, the nature of work? How do we build policy that gives us an economy that works for everyone? And then the book ends up with, again, a vision of what it's like in the future when we have one, and a bit about how we got there. It is a book to empower you to go and implement this in your own community. Full of references, footnotes, resources, examples of where this is being done in communities, in companies, in countries, and it's a fun read. I think you'll enjoy it. So we were asked, how do we build bridges across the partisan divide?
So these are the beginning of more questions that are coming live this evening. So Isabel over here is capturing questions, shelling them over, putting them on a screen, and we're going to start to answer them. So please, if you have a question and you're wanting to interact with us live, www.natcapsolutions.org/livestream. Put in the questions. It'll get to Isabel. She'll put them over here and put them on the screen, and we'll do our best to answer them.
So the partisan divide. In this country, Republicans and Democratic Congresspeople used to argue on the floor of the House, the Senate, and then go have drinks together. We used to have conversations across the partisan divide. I think it is part of this neoliberal narrative that we are inherently in conflict with each other, and that's fine. We're going to fight it out, and then we're going to hate each other. Why?
I'm actually not convinced, Senator, that's the neoliberal narrative. I think the neoliberal narrative is that government is basically incompetent and needs to be as small as possible. So if you can take one party, take over that party, and have them basically make government useless, they've won.
Yeah, you used to be a Republican. Jeff and I are both of extinct political parties. I'm a Teddy Roosevelt Republican, and there aren't many of those around anymore. We believe in entrepreneurship, and we believe in doing as much for yourself as you can, but we also believe that there is a role for government. So I think the first step across this partisan divide is to start having these conversations with your neighbors. My neighbor on the ranch is the head of the Boulder County Republican Party. He and I used to be roping partners together. We shoe his horse, he comes over, drinks some whiskey, and we talk. And we care about each other, and we know that we're there for each other. So I think the first step is neighborliness.
And I think the next step is to get engaged. That in the last presidential election, 60% of the population voted, which is 5% less than voted in the previous presidential election. That 5%, by the way, made a huge difference in what the end result was. But when I was going to school, 65 and 60 were D's and F's. So by not participating, we're failing our own democracy.
We need to retake democracy. Our representatives now are elected in safe districts because of gerrymandering. We have voter suppression. These are things that we as citizens can tackle. We just got asked the question of, what did you have for lunch today? Did I have lunch today?
I had a beet salad. I did. It was good.
Go on.
It was downtown Denver, meeting with a friend, and I had a beet salad from local vegetables.
Salad.
It was yummy.
Time banking. Can time banking make a difference in the new economy? You bet. This is a scheme that is actually very active in Japan. They're in several communities in the United States where you volunteer and your hours are tracked. And as a result, somebody volunteers for you, for your causes. It's used a lot to take care of the elderly in Japan. It can be codified into, for example, Ithaca, New York, has a complementary currency called Ithaca Hours, where you get a little piece of paper, an Ithaca Hour dollar, for the time that you put into making your community a better place. Complementary currencies are a part of the answer. Universal basic income can be a part of the answer. We have, again, a vast array of policy measures that we can bring to bear to solve the problems facing us if we can just get this new narrative working. What's a healthy human population size for the Earth? That kind of depends on your assumptions. I did a paper with some folk a few years back, about 30 years back, in which we looked at, can we supply energy for a population of 9 billion people on the earth just using energy efficiency and renewable energy? Answer, yes. There were a few areas where we ran out of some things. Cobalt is in short supply, but there are substitutes for cobalt. Some of the people who think that we're facing collapse think that the population will go to about 1.5 billion. If you really want to give yourself a bad day, go Google near-term human collapse. Don't, because it'll put you in a very bad mood. These are people who say humanity goes extinct within the next 10 years or so. This is what we're up against. I think we can survive and thrive. So how do we get to a population that is somewhat more sustainable? A man named Dr. Malcolm Potts, University of California, Berkeley School of Public Health, has shown that if you do 5 things, you get to 0 population growth without any draconian measures, without coercion. What are the 5 things? You feed people, end hunger. You reform land tenure so that poor people who are just squatting on a piece of ground have a deed to it. Now they have a bit of capital. They can begin to leverage their way up the economic ladder. You educate people, particularly women. You provide information and access to contraception. You give people choice. In every country where these 5 things have been done, population goes to ZPG and stays there. So that's another problem we can solve if we want to get about it. Jeff.
Okay, so here's a mouthful of a question. How do we begin to transition from an economy that is currently profit and money driven, which ignores other forms of value such as environmental resiliency and social well-being, when it is so entrenched in our way of doing things?
I'm glad you have that one. I'm going to have a glass of whiskey.
First off, it's not going to be quick or easy. Let's step back for a little bit and start with capitalism. The word capitalism is based on the concept of measuring capital. Capital is a measure of wealth. The root of the word wealth is well-being. If you take a look at how we measure capital these days, we are not measuring well-being. So we have a long ways to go. I mean, and economy is the rules by which you take care of your home. And I would say we're not doing a very good job of doing that either. So I think at a highest level, we need to rethink how we're forming capitalism so it actually delivers the stuff we care about instead of just financial wealth, which becomes aggregated in the hands of very little, with the liquidation sale of natural capital happening at the same time and social capital being trashed. But I think if you, again, to come back to what's personal to you and what you care about personally, each one of us is currently receiving about 5,000 advertising and brand-related impressions a day. 5,000. It creates, and it is the largest education system ever formed on the globe. It is much more effective than what happens in our families and in our churches and in our schools. And what it's doing is inculcating a set of neoliberal values about what is value and what do we care about. And so that's where you have people crazed to be waiting for days in line for new products. You know, and that's where you have obesity crises. That's where you have people having, it creates desire that's not really innate or natural. We desire things instead of these other things that we care about, like relationships and experiences. And so one of the things we need to do is to take a look at advertising and at least decode it and maybe put some boundaries upon it so that it's teaching us values that are actually pro-social and help to create a world that we care about.
But the first is the story of who are we as human beings. When humans pre-humans came down out of the trees in Africa, we were naked, our claws aren't worth much, our teeth are pretty inadequate. The neolibs say who we are is that we acquire and we defend. True, but that's only half the story. The ecologists, anthropologists, archaeologists, evolutionary biologists, positive psychologists are telling us now that's not all of who we are as humans. Again, when we came down out of the trees, we survived. And you are here. You are the descendant of those who survived because we bonded and because we told story. We explained to ourselves who we are. We created myths, we created meaning, but this bonding enabled the very few of us, and apparently, according to the DNA records, there were at one time fewer than 18,000 of these pre-human individuals. That's fewer than the currently endangered gorillas. We survived and conquered the world because we worked together. We cared more. As individuals, we cared more for all of us than we cared for ourselves. And this is what it means to be human. And this is, I think, the crux of this new story of how do we get well-being? How do we create community well-being? How do we have a world that works for everyone? The UN Global Goals. I wear the pin of the UN Global Goals. I had a small hand in helping them get across the finish line. I was one of the last people to testify to the UN's Open Working Group. It's an amazing experiment in democracy, global democracy. People the world around wrote in to online consultations. They showed up at in-person consultations. And the Open Working Group, who represented nations from around the world, crafted these 17 goals of what we have to do to achieve sustainability on the planet. They are worth fighting for. They clearly are a part of what's going to help us build a world that works for everyone. I'm dedicated to them. I spent some time this summer with the Unreasonable Group, which was working with the U.S. State Department, bringing entrepreneurs from around the world, one for each of the goals, and showing that we can entrepreneur our way to these solutions. What can you do about the goals? Learn what they are. Most Americans have never heard of them. And yet when they were presented, when the Open Working Group presented them to the UN General Assembly in the fall of 2014, they were going to present them and let the world debate them for a year. The General Assembly said, okay, good idea. We like them. Because, again, they had been created out of this group that was working together. So they took a year and built all of the targets for the goals. Learn what they are. Get involved. Pick one that you care about. And let's make them happen. Here's a good one. How do we make violent conflict and war non-existent? That's going to take every one of us. But I think it starts with recognizing, as Dr. Donna Hicks of Harvard says, most conflict comes because someone feels that their dignity has been violated. And recognizing that if we accord respect to the person with whom we're in conflict, we have a basis for a conversation. Now, yeah, we have way too many very dangerous nuclear bombs, thousands of them, way more than enough around the planet to simply destroy the planet, to end life as we know it on the planet. And so ramping that down to a much smaller number, putting in place the kinds of safeguards of insisting on conversation before one of these things gets used. The U.S. has been, throughout the nuclear era, a country that has threatened first use of nuclear weapons again and again and again. It'd be a good idea to kind of back down from that one. We don't want to use them. We're the only country that has used them. So committing that we will not use them first would be a very good first step. The other cause of war is privation, is lack of security. And so ensuring that everybody on Earth has enough to eat. Climate change, global warming, is driving conflict around the world. It was, the scientists now tell us, one of the driving causes of the conflict in Syria. So let's tackle climate change. And we know how to roll climate change backward using, first of all, energy efficiency, renewable energy, regenerative agriculture, ways of taking carbon out of the air, putting it into the soil. Let's solve that problem. And when we do, by the way, we'll make a lot of money. One of my prior books Climate Capitalism, and then the paperback version, The Way Out, Kickstarting Capitalism to Save Our Economic Ass, started out by saying, oh, fine, assume climate change is a hoax. Don't go to Vegas on the odds of that being true, but if all you are is a profit-maximizing capitalist, you'll do exactly what you'd do if you were scared to death of climate change, because we know how to solve it at a profit. If it's a hoax, we'll make a lot of money. If it's real, we'll make a lot of money and be on our way to solving it. Either way, let's go. In that sense, the science just became bar talk. Let's solve the problem, then we can argue about the details of the science. But the science is becoming increasingly scary, and the economics. New report just out. It will cost the world trillions of dollars, trillions, if we fail to deal with climate change. So let's do it. When we solve it, it's an investment. It pays us back. If we don't solve it, the costs which we are bearing now are a loss. It's a write-off. We've lost that money. So let's just be good capitalists and solve this problem. Education. How do we do education?
Yeah, we're giving
you all the tough
That's
ones.
Right. There was a time in the 1800s where public education didn't exist, and the country came together and decided that it was a basic human right that everybody should have a basic education. And they created public education so that every single citizen of the United States got to learn how to read and learn how to write and learn how to do basic math. If you fast forward that now, people that have a college degree are making vastly more money than people with a high school degree. And the cost of college has skyrocketed beyond the grasp of most people, so that most people, when they're going into schools, have to come out with a debt that they're going to take decades to be able to repay. And so I think we need to step back and rethink the priority. If we put the same priority on education, personally, that we think that learning is important to us, and as a community that we think that education is important, and we started to rescale where it sits into the larger scheme of things. If education was as important as entertainment, imagine how much capital we would have available.
Education, transforming education, is one of the working groups that we are creating in our new organization. And by the way, we haven't named this new organization yet. One suggestion was the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, we all, but there already is a big organization, we, and I don't want to appear to be stealing their name. Another one is ASAP, Alliance for Sustainability and Prosperity, but that's a mouthful. Another one is Playbook, because we're going to write the playbook on how do we solve all these problems. None of those are quite right yet, so if you have a bright idea on what we should name this beast, please write in to www.natcapsolutions.org/Kickstarter. At the bottom of Kickstarter, on our campaign, our website on Kickstarter, is a tab on comments. Comment. Join us in this conversation. And please, also, while you're there, make a pledge. It'll help get this book out. So, what's our take on worker-owned businesses? Great idea, except the workers actually have to have a say in how the business is run. When you take United Airlines, it's a worker-owned business, but it's not a worker-controlled business. So start at the local level. Shop. When you go to buy something, buy from a business that's locally owned, where you can talk to the owner. Support the businesses that are part of this new economy. Every time you spend money, you're voting with your dollars. Make sure your vote is standing for something. There are a whole array of ways to reorganize how we run business. A little company in Seattle called Gravity, the owner said, I am making, 400 times what my lowest paid worker is making? This is ridiculous. I'm going to give up my big salary and ensure that everybody working for the business is making at least $70,000 a year. And the conventional economists screamed, this will fail. You have to have these fat incentives if you're going to have people be good entrepreneurs. The business is thriving. They imagine that. They're beating applicants off with a stick. Everybody wants to work there. So they have the choice of the best talent. We're going to transform how we do business. what it means to be a manager of a business, and we're going to ensure that businesses take care of their workers. Jeff's wearing a little button, B, for B Lab, for B corporations, benefit corporations. This is a whole new way of doing business where the company commits as part of its charter, as part of its articles of incorporation, that it exists to be in business for the benefit of the world. And there are some very big companies looking at this. Unilever is trying to figure out how to be a B Corp. Several of the companies they own, like Seventh Generation, Ben & Jerry's, already are B corporations. It's an international movement, so if you run a company, take a look at B Lab. How do you get locally involved? My old friend, the folk singer Kate Wolf, once said, "Find what you care about and live a life that shows it." Is it early childhood education? Is it protecting the environment? Is it dealing with inequality? Find an organization in your community that you think is doing a good job and lend a hand. To give a couple hours a week. Ask them, how can you be helpful?
Can you scale back to that question, Isabel? So the second half of that question was, how does one begin to change things at a local level with no experience in interacting with government or municipalities? Well, I have two answers to that. The first thing is that local is really crucially important. Very often, I remember I lived in Los Angeles for about 20 years. I went there to save the world. I obviously failed.
Well, so far. We'll get it done.
But I remember sitting at our house and we would go down the street, ride a bike or drive off to work, and there would be very motivated neighbors who really cared about what was going on in the world, who were listening to NPR, and they could tell you in detail what was going on in the Middle East. And while they were listening to NPR in their car, down the street that we lived is a tree dying and a child crying. And they missed that. But they could tell you in detail what was going on the other side of the globe. It is outside of our sphere of influence for most of us to have very much impact on what's going on the other side of the globe. It is very much within our ability to be able to impact what is happening on our block. I would say it's within our responsibility. And the dearth of responsibility is something that has been fostered by the neoliberal economic model, primarily through advertising, trying to teach us that if we have a problem, we should go outside of ourselves to a good or service that's going to take care of it for us. Instead of teaching us that we're personally responsible people who are resourceful and we get together with our neighbors and we get together with our community and we solve problems. This is one of the things. Personal responsibility is the core of freedom. The neolibs claimed that they were trying to foster freedom and create liberty in the world, and they did the exact opposite by focusing people on being selfish. It has not worked, and we need to fix that experiment.
My friend Dana Meadows said, "We are seeking to meet non-material needs with material things." It's called shopping therapy, and it doesn't work. So let's get clear, what do we truly need versus what is our greed, and ensure that we all have what we need. And this you can help to do by, as Jeff said, looking at your community. What are the needs in your community and what can you do about it?
And you can meet your city council people. You just start. You go call up and introduce yourself and meet to someone. You go to city council meetings. There are plenty of ways to start onboarding. So it is easy with no experience to gain experience by showing up, because democracy is not a spectator sport.
Democracy is a contact sport. It's rough, but educate yourself. Go online, learn what the issue is that you care about, read both sides, decide what you believe. Don't just take what you've been told. Decide what you believe. It's an interesting experiment. Write down, "I believe," and then write down what you believe. And then ask why. And examine your own thoughts and beliefs. And then form what it is you believe in. Educate yourself on the issues and get active. What's the status of the effort recently called Leading for Well-Being? It is being folded in with Alliance for Sustainability and Prosperity to create this new organization for which we need a name. So step up and help us. Let's name this puppy.
And also, that is a portion of what we're planning on the Kickstarter campaign is being able to give capacity for Hunter to be able to work on helping to form and frame that organization. So if you have it within your means to be able to donate 20 or 25, 50 or $100, please go to www.natcapsolutions.org/Kickstarter, make a pledge. We will gladly, we'll send you a copy of the book when it's published. We will, be able to help participate based on the benefits, but we really need your help to be able to create the economic engine so that we can give the support we need for Hunter to be able to do these things.
How do we get sustainability into urban development? That's yours, lad.
So, this is something that we're not going to be able to answer in a short term this evening. Just to be honest, it's a much larger concept than we're going to be able to cover in the time we have here.
Gosh, all the other questions have been so simple.
One of the things that we know about land use and land use planning and urban development is that it tends to be done in silos. That the people that are doing flood control do flood control. The people that are doing energy efficiency, they do energy. The people that provide energy do that over here. The people that do streets go over here. The people that are supplying water over there. I remember our friend Andy Lipkus from Tree People in Los Angeles pointing out that in Los Angeles we were spending $500 million a year in flood control to take rain that was falling out of the sky and to quickly issue it out to the ocean efficiently when it hit. Then we were spending $1 billion a year to take water from across the entire vast western United States and to drain it down into Los Angeles. That is daft. That is just, and so stepping back and using a whole systems integrated approach to looking at urban development and breaking down the silos that naturally exist within government mandates and ordinances to be able to do a whole systems approach is the key to being able to do land development.
Isabel, next. Whoa. How do you get the 1% of the multi-billion-dollar corporations to divest their fortunes for the benefit of the whole? You delegitimize them. You work with them to share what they have, but those that don't, delegitimize them. Oh, this isn't possible, is it? Exxon may be going broke. It was a year or so ago the world's largest corporation. And all of you who are putting solar on your roof, who are driving electric cars, who are part of the renewable revolution, you are taking their business model away. How do you get these corporations to listen to you? Talk to them. Start nicely, write them. Write to, all corporations have a website where you can put in your comments and see if you get a real answer back. If you don't, write to them a little less nicely. If you don't, stop buying their products and tell all your friends that you have stopped buying their products and why. Delegitimize them.
And on a personal level, downscale. The reason why consumer goods and products are valued so much is because we've been taught that. But the reality is we care about people and our relationships and the beauty of sunsets and our dog laughing and wagging its tail and looking at us loyalty and the beauty of our children and the quality of our marriages a heck of a lot more than we care about our consumer products. There's a whole voluntary simplicity movement, which is not about trying to make life lower quality and by sitting there and suffering and trying to do without. It's about actually doing with what matters. What in your heart matters most to you? The quality of your relationships with others. Invest time there. Stop being busy. Busy is a bad choreography choice. It is not a badge of honor that says you're important. It means that you're not able to take the time to do education, to take personal responsibility in your community, to be able to pay attention to your children, to pay attention to your friends, to not be rushing through conversations. These are all, if you want to be able to delegitimize the 0.01%, let's start by delegitimizing that being incredibly wealthy is the key to happiness in life. The key in happiness in life is to pay attention to what's important to you.
'Tis true. I worked for a time in Afghanistan. Afghans would say, "Chatorasti, how are you?" And they would wait for an answer. They wanted to know. And the Afghans that I was with, many of them had nothing, no things. but they were happy in a way that I had never been until then. It was the Afghans who taught me how to be happy. And that gets to the next question of what are the cultural differences in a finer future? This new narrative that we're trying to bring into being is going to have to be individually crafted in every country, in every culture, in every community. And it will differ from place to place. I once had an argument in Japan with the man who wrote for the Japanese equivalent of the Wall Street Journal, who hated what we were saying with natural capitalism. And what he was saying is that the whole concept of capitalism was bad, that we should do what Jeff was just saying, look into ourselves and choose a life that was less full of things, that was more about happiness. The Bhutanese concept of gross national happiness is in many ways what kicked off this whole conversation. I was there working with an international expert group that was asked by the then Prime Minister to use gross national happiness as the basis of a new development policy. And as part of that, he said to me, "Hunter, your job is to reinvent the global economy." And I said, "Me?" So I went and asked people smarter than me how we would do this. And this is what kicked off the conversation that has now led to the book, A Finer Future. But part of the answer is each one of us is going to have to make it up for ourselves. And then we are going to have to do it as a whole. The area where I debated with the Bhutanese was that their concept of gross national happiness was entirely internal to you. They had no part of it that was about business or the economy. So it needs to be all of it. It needs to be what makes you happy, but what makes all of us happy together.
And one of the things that you've been probably hearing is things that almost sound contradictory, but the solutions to complex problems are not simple soundbite answers. That life is not a binary yes or no, black or white, I'm this or I'm that. I'm a Republican or Democrat, and because of that, here's my identity and here's what it means. It is a complex tension between opposing ideas. Yes, we need capitalism. Yes, we need to be able to accrue enough wealth to support ourselves and our family and support our livelihoods. And yes, we need to pay more attention to what matters to us in our relationships. These are all and both things. They're not either or.
Conventional economists, what do they say? An increasing number of them are recognizing that conventional economics is not answering the problems facing us. There are global movements like Rethink Economics, student-driven movements where students of economics are saying, this doesn't make sense. Economics for the Anthropocene, third millennium economics. These are all efforts to pull in what we've learned from ecological economics, from regenerative economics, from all of the things we've been talking about, and craft a new discipline of economics. In many ways, the economics discipline grew out of an envy of the physicists who had natural laws. And so the early economists said, well, we're scientists too, we have the laws of economics. And they basically took the equilibrium equation straight from physics, plugged in economics terms and said, yeah, there you go. And a bit like Ptolemaic astronomy, it approximated the real world for a while, but it's breaking down. We need to redefine the discipline of economics. And this is why people like Kate Raworth, who is not an economist, or Lynn Ostrom, who won the economics Nobel, who is not an economist, are bringing a richness to the discipline. So we need to have these conversations with the traditional economists, but we need to move to what we call regenerative capitalism, regenerative economics. This is a phrase put forth by my colleague John Fullerton. John was 18 years with J.P. Morgan, left as managing director. In 2001, he just walked away. He said, something is rotten in this system. And I'm going to try to pull the best of science, the best of everybody who's working on these issues. He has put forth 8 principles. And it's worth downloading his paper. Go to capitalinstitute.org and download the paper, Regenerative Capitalism, and study it. These are the principles. In right relationship. The economy is this little linear process inside of society, inside of the biosphere. And this relationship between our economic processes and nature is critical that we understand and get right. Holistic wealth. Jeff has been saying this. Wealth is not just money. It's well-being. Innovative and adaptive. Humans are entrepreneurial. We begin again. We create things. We innovate and we adapt. Darwin didn't say survival of the fittest, meaning the strongest, toughest, meanest bastard. It was survival of the adaptive. Empowered participation. This is what we were talking about democracy. Edge effect abundance. In nature, the most abundant ecosystems are where several of them come together, where a river meets the ocean, where a meadow meets a forest. Why? Because there is diversity. And abundance depends on diversity. Robust circulation. This is a concept of the circular economy. Walter Stahel's work in Europe, now taken up by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. My friend Anders Wigman, who just did a study of most of the countries in Europe, showing that closing the loops in our economy, so eliminating the concept of waste, would add trillions of dollars to the economy, create millions of jobs, and do a much better job of solving the climate crisis than a lot of the ways we've been tackling it. Seeks balance. This is, if you will, the Navajo concept of harmony. We have a very efficient economy. It's really good at flowing money to the top, and it's very brittle. It could collapse at any moment. It already has a time or two. And perhaps most important, it honors community and place. We can have a global economy so long as the places within it have integrity. And we honor them, and we honor the dignity of the people living there. These concepts, they're not perfect. John and I argue. They're the best I've found in 40-odd years of looking, and this is why John is a co-author on the book, A Finer Future. So join the argument. Come to the website, www.natcapsolutions.org/Kickstarter, and comment. Ask us more questions. We've about run out of time here. And carry on the conversation. We had a summit in May called the Regenerative Future Summit. I'm sorry you didn't make it to, whoever asked this question. Push us hard enough, maybe we'll do another one. But the whole point of this new organization that was formed at that summit, what happened at the summit? We're building this new organization, is to take these conversations and take them globally. So Lorenzo Firamonti will be running a center in Africa for this conversation. People like Richard Wilkinson, Kate Pickett, who wrote the book Spirit Level in the UK, will be part of this work. People in Asia, people in India, people in Latin America. We've been pulling our colleagues together from around the planet to have this conversation, and we need you. Right now, I really need you to help us with this Kickstarter campaign. Please pledge, if just $10, is it a latte or two? If enough of us do this, we'll get this book published. And if enough of us do it, we'll build this interactive website in which we can have these conversations on an ongoing basis. We are, a minute away from the hour. I'd sit here all night and chat with you, but I guess we've got to call it quits in a
here's
minute.
some other questions that came in that we're going to go move over to our Kickstarter page. There's a question about
cap and trade.
Cap and trade, and then about
Cap and trade. I'm a big fan.
And the work of CCL. CCL is my second favorite solution. I actually like cap and trade, but I think what CCL is doing, if they can pull it off and get a rate for carbon that matters, is a huge possibility.
Citizens Climate Lobby is CCL, and they are mobilizing people, calling for a carbon tax. Full stop, we need a price on carbon, however we can get it done. I think cap and trade is better, but let's have this conversation online. How do we internationalize and popularize it?
How do we do, what about Bitcoins, which is
Oh,
fascinating.
Bitcoins are cool. Actually, even more than Bitcoin, blockchain. And we talk a bit about blockchain in the book. It's going to transform everything. We have several massive disruptions coming at us. Check out the video, Tony Seba, S-E-B-A, C-R-E-S. Google that and you will learn about the mother of all disruptions coming at us in the energy sphere. Blockchain's another one of these. If we take all of these disruptions and use them to our advantage, boy howdy, we can build a beautiful world.
And Aviz, we know Aviz.
Avaz, yeah, Avaz has millions of people around the world active. They are some of the people that I really want to go chat with. They're more oriented towards immediate activism, and we're more oriented towards how do we build this new narrative. But we all have to be doing this together. Oh my, lots of good questions. Most important leadership quality. Tolerance of ambiguity, the ability to learn, and humility. You want to see a great leader? Check out Paul Pullman, who says, I run the world's largest NGO. I'm in this to serve the world. Benefits of energy efficiency and renewables.
Well, and it goes down to carbon capture and storage, which the numbers just don't span on, is our opinion, but we'd love to chat with you about it. We think that it's a myth.
It's real, it works. You just double the price of burning fossil fuels, and they are already not competitive with renewables. And now we're 2 minutes over time.
Yeah, solution there is Tony Seba's solution is a good one.
Yeah, check out Tony Seba. If Tony's right, the world will be 100% renewably powered by 2030.
Just by market forces.
And I think he's right. Artem, how long can we go at this? 5 minutes. Okay, we got 5 minutes.
So, most important leadership quality for those in the C-suite to develop in order to bring a finer future.
Well, I said that. Tolerance of ambiguity, the capacity to learn, and humility, the recognition that you don't know it all, and that we need to be continually learning.
I think it's the courage to be able to do what's going to be unpopular and to be able to tell people this is the route we're going to take, even though, like what Paul Pullman has done, when he basically said, I'm not going to put out quarterly stock returns. And if you don't think that that's the right thing to do, you're not a good investor for us. That took courage. So I'm thinking courage to do the right thing.
Ray Anderson said, I go into the future, I go around the curve, and then I come back and tell us what's going on. Now, he did own 51% of the company, so that was a little easier. Paul does not. He is a hired manager, but Paul is a man of courage. More women in the C-suite would help. It turns out when you have greater leadership of women in the C-suite, and particularly on the board, more than 3 women on a board of directors, company tends to financially outperform. Why? We don't really know. Maybe because women are better at asking questions, listening to others, but those are certainly good qualities.
They're connected knowers versus separate knowers, and so they have a different frame to be able to look at the world. And the neoliberal model, I haven't talked to you about this yet, the neoliberal model is built on a patriarchal, separate way of knowing.
Well, it was all men that built it.
That's a little surprise.
Little surprise. Okay, we got to quit. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. Thanks to all of you who sent in questions. And please go on the website, www.natcapsolutions.org/Kickstarter, and make a pledge. I will be deeply grateful. And I forget which pledge it is, but if you make a big enough one, we'll pay for you to come here to Colorado and have a glass of whiskey with me. I would enjoy that.
And we would like to thank you all for all that you do, for putting in time for listening to this, for putting in time gauging ideas, for working in your community. What you do matters. Thank you.
Thank you.